friends. Well, today we have part 3 of my interview with a university professor who's writing a research paper on the van life. In this video we talk about how government can help van dwellers, and in what way, and also what's the purpose of his research.
I've got one last question. A couple of weeks ago, actually about a month ago, I had a meeting with the mayor of Victoria, and she's very interested in this phenomenon of people living in vans, because in Victoria, same as everywhere else, there's a shortage of labor, there's a housing crisis, and she sees, well, if people live in vans, at least more people can come to Victoria and work. So the question for you is, what can government, either be at the municipal level, the provincial level, what kind of infrastructure could be put in place to assist van dwellers that doesn't exist already?
They could have safe places. I think especially for women. For female van dwellers, life is a lot harder, because I remember a couple weeks ago I was looking for a spot to park in a place that's well known for van dwellers, and I saw this beautiful girl getting in her van and she's shaking her blanket out. And I thought, oh boy, I bet 9 times out of 10 she's being harassed by other van dwellers, older guys. She's in her 20s, I'm in my 40s, saying, hey, good looking, and like they have to deal with all that BS. So for them to have a safe place where there's other people around, it would be way better for them if they had like maybe a secured area, like a parking lot or whatever, where there's maybe a shower and a place to get some clean water. That would be awesome. The problem though is there is a portion of people that are quote-unquote homeless that have mental health issues. And that's why these tent cities and shelters and stuff, nobody wants to really hang out there, because these people have mental health issues and they're screaming at the top of their lungs and have a very erratic behavior, and they're stealing stuff. And so when you get a whole bunch of people in an area, you're going to have a portion of people like that. And the great thing about being in a van is you can leave.
Right.
But if you want to be there because you feel safe, it becomes an issue. So providing a safe place and maybe having some, like a security option perhaps, where there's an on-site security guard to deal with people that are being troublesome. Governmentally, I think another big part of what I see is, unfortunately, there are some people in the van life who are not doing it as a choice. They're doing it as a result of their circumstance.
For sure.
And they have drug addictions, or they have mental health issues or whatever. And they don't care. They don't care about what their van... You go to under the Terminal Street Bridge, and they just dump garbage everywhere. They dump their poo and
homeless.
Pee.
They're rolling homeless.
And what I would like to see is the police enforce the laws against those that deserve it, and not lump us all in with the rule breakers. If people, it's like driving a car. If you break a traffic law, go after the people that break the traffic law, but don't think that we're all the guys dumping our pee jug on the side of the road, because we're not, right? So that's a big thing. Yeah, that's probably, I always try to encourage fellow van dwellers to be responsible. And the other thing is not, like, with the parking is a huge thing. I don't know how the government could help with this, but I always encourage people not to park in front of someone's house. If I had a $500,000 house, do you think I want some guy's van parked in front of it?
So you don't park in front of houses?
Never, ever, ever.
So where do you park?
I park only in front of apartment buildings.
Okay.
It's very transient. Like 90% of the time. Or I'll park in a light industrial area.
Oh, okay.
Where it's just industry, right? And nobody cares, especially on a weekend. There's nobody there.
Right.
And it's nice and quiet. And I don't want to be a burden to anybody.
Right.
I want to live my life. I don't want to be a burden. I want to do my thing. I don't want to have any problems, and I don't want to cause anybody problems. I don't want to lower their land value and all that stuff, right?
What about internet, Wi-Fi, stuff like that? Do you think the government should be doing anything in terms of making that infrastructure available to van dwellers?
Well, they could help by. This is a problem in Canada. We pay the highest data usage fees in the entire world, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Americans, they have endless
Unlimited
internet data.
Yeah.
They pay $50 or whatever it is, and they have unlimited. Here, we're I mean, when I first lived in the van for 2 years, my maximum was 3 gigabytes, which means I couldn't afford to do anything in the van but read text. If I wanted to watch a video, it has to be done at Starbucks.
Yep.
So that was, I think, in terms of the Wi-Fi data stuff, if they could regulate the industry better, maybe increase competition so the prices went down, so that, because we're penalized for, and I guess that comes down to gas costs as well. We're penalized for that, but
Okay.
we're paying way more for gas. But you know what? I'd be paying for gas anyway, and it's not really that big of a difference. Okay, so I'm paying $200 a month for gas. If I was driving a Honda Civic, I'd be paying $100.
Right.
It's really not that big of a difference.
This other stuff for infrastructure. So if there was a parking spot where people could, it was secure, or we had permits in place for people
Yeah.
who were permanent van dwellers who could just park.
Yeah.
Do you think people would pay for that? So if
I think a lot of females would. It depending on how much it is.
Mm-hmm.
I've never paid for parking once.
Right.
Why do it when I know that I know of a dozen places I can park for free?
Right. That's it for my questions. Do you have any questions for me?
What are you hoping to achieve with this study?
Well, we know a lot about work-life balance and work-life conflict. We understand what work is, and we understand what life is as two separate entities. And lots of people have researched how they conflict with one another and how they work with one another. But it's all been done in the context of people living in a house and going off to work. And with families, it means two people living in a house going off to two different places for work, and kids going off to school, and how they all bash with one another.
Right.
What we don't know is how work and life for van dwellers fit together. And I think it's far more interesting, and it informs that work-life balance literature because, well, in today's world, work doesn't just sit here in a box. We don't go off to this building and that's the work building. Yeah. And life doesn't just sit in this box called a house. It extends beyond that. So both of them are far more fluid. Well, van dwellers are living out that fluidity. There's fluidity in the movement of the house, and as you've demonstrated, jobs are fluid, where you're going off to one job or another.
Yeah.
So I think understanding how van dwellers are doing this actually informs the literature in a much better way than studying people sitting in their houses and then going off to their offices, because sitting in their office, sitting at home and then going to their offices is not reality anyway.
Right.
So my object is to get a little piece of the picture from as many people as possible to create kind of a mosaic of what is the van life dweller experience, to understand that phenomenon relative to work.
Right.
So I lend voice to this community that hasn't been lent before as it applies to work, and it teaches the normies something about work-life balance at the same time.
Most van dwellers are just regular. I mean, I've met a lot of van dwellers doing these meetups and stuff, and you can see by the people here, they're all just regular people.
Absolutely.
We're not a bunch of drug addicts or drunks or weirdos. I mean, there's obviously a few every now and then you meet some, but the vast majority are just regular everyday people looking for a better way to have balance in their life. I know this friend of mine, he works with this lady, and he works graveyards with her, and then she also has another job. So she's working 80 hours a week. And she's bought into this idea that she has to work like crazy just to pay rent. Whereas she's not informed or educated or open-minded enough to realize that there's other options out there. You don't have to like work yourself to the bone to pay for a place you're never there.
Right.
Just to have quote unquote security.
Yeah.
And it's like, if people can open their mind to other ideas about how to live rather than just...
But you need to be a relatively rugged soul. Not every person can show up at the van when it's -10 and open up the door, hop in with their parka, and turn on the heater and sit there and wait for the van to heat up.
Yeah.
Okay? Not everybody can do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's like a friend, fellow Vandweller, he described them as Vandwellers are more crusty, and people that it's like you know, you have pink on the spectrum and you have crusty. The more crusty you are, like a homeless guy who's digging in dumpsters, he is really crusty. But then you have like the prima donnas who got perfect nails and perfect everything. They're super pink. Yeah. So we're more on the crusty side of the spectrum for sure.
Well, and truthfully, on September 2nd, 2018, sitting on the beach when the sun's outside, this still is the relatively pink crew. I want to come back in January and talk to people.
Well, they won't be at the beach.
No.
I can tell you. Yeah, because when it's winter, I mean, I know I was talking to a fellow guy here, and a lot of people say this, and it's true, you live outside of the van, not in the van. But my next goal is to have a high top so I can live more in the van, like the van next to us here. Because you want to be comfortable in your home. One negative thing about van dwelling I didn't mention is that you are in public a lot. I've never been more in public than I am now. And that has detractions when you have to deal with other people's baloney. There's screaming kids, or people that are annoying the way they eat their food, or just, you know, you're in public when you're sitting at the Starbucks or wherever you are, you never have a break. So I'm trying, like when I first started this, I didn't come back to the van until like 8 o'clock. By 10 or 9:30 I'm asleep, right? But as time goes on, I want to spend more time in the van. And I forgot what I was saying. We're
talking about crusty and talking about coming back in January. So my intention in January is to reach out to people through the online community, you know, and connect with people who are van dwellers in Vancouver then, and say, you know, I'm coming to town, I'd like to interview people. And I'll be able to find interviews that way. There's no question. But I'm sure that the voice, the story, will shift.
Well, the key is heat. And if you have a good heat source like the Wave 3, I wake up in the morning, it's 21 Celsius. I'm fine. But I say a large portion of the group doesn't. They freeze their butts off. Well, a few years ago when we had that really cold winter and I had this high top van, not this one, that separate one, I froze. I had 3 sleeping bags and I was fine when I was under the sleeping bags. But for the first half an hour, I would have to lie on top with my jacket and pants on until the blankets got warm enough where I could get under and not be really cold. And then you get out and it's freaking freezing. Because the heater wasn't big enough to heat up the airspace, and that's why I chose a low top this time.
Oh, okay.
Because it's always the less volume there is to heat, the warmer you're going to be.
Interesting.
So, yeah, that was tough, and for the winter, that's the tough part of it. But if you can get the heat situation sorted out, which is not rocket science,
no,
it's not that bad, even in the winter.
I want to thank you for your time. I'm just going to stop this before my battery dies.
Alright guys, well, there you have it. It's an interesting conversation we had there. And hope you enjoyed it. Lots of things to think about. Thanks for watching and be well, my friends.